Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. My name is Rob, where today I'm going to talk about dem Bayonetta sales. So I'm coming to you today with some awesome and beautiful, wonderful 101 on the Wii U footage because it kind of fits with the theme of today's video. I know I've been making kind of a lot of videos centered around Nintendo games and Nintendo products the last week or two. I don't really know why that is. It's just sort of been what's been relevant news, and when I was looking for other stuff to talk about today, honestly, there's really nothing else happening that seems to be interesting. However, this story about Bayonetta 2 and its sales in Japan has been kind of the talk of the town. A lot of folks are talking about it. A lot of websites are talking about it. A lot of my fellow awesome gamers in the Gamers at Large network on YouTube have been talking about it, so I felt like I might as well chime in with some of my own thoughts. Of course, what I'm talking about is the fact that Bayonetta's quote-unquote first week sales were just revealed in Japan, where the game was purported to have sold 38,000 copies in only its first week, which of course isn't really making that big of a splash. That's not really a high number for the first week of what it appears to be a very high-profile exclusive game, for any platform. So there's been so much fervor and heated debate and, a lot of buzz and hype leading up to Bayonetta 2. It's still not out in the States. That's coming out October 30th. So when it came to the Japanese launch, where, it's a pretty Japanese-centric kind of game, and it's also a Japanese company, Platinum Games, that's making it, a lot of people thought that it would maybe make a bigger splash. But of course, there's one specific caveat that seems to be throwing a lot of people off. Not a lot of people who are actually making reports about the sales seem to be noticing this, and then a lot of other people who are fans of Bayonetta or excited for the game have been really, trying to make sure that this information gets out, very vocal about what's going on here. So when we look at the first week, quote-unquote, sales of Bayonetta 2, it's actually only including the first 2 days. The game came out only a day before the end of that week's reporting, so it only literally logged 2 days worth of sales within that first week. So you got basically 40,000 copies in 2 days, as opposed to 40,000 copies in an entire first week. I think that's interesting for a few reasons. If I was to make a comparison, when I pull up some of the sales numbers here, I feel like that could put the game on pace to sell well over 100,000 copies in its first week. I mean, if it did 40,000, in its first 2 days, maybe, 80,000 within its first 4 or 5 days. By the time that first 7 days is up, that game will have probably sold well over 100,000 copies. Hopefully. 40,000 copies in 2 days is really not that bad. It's actually pretty darn good, to tell you the truth. It's average. I think that what's happening is it's coming out right on the heels of a big global launch of Destiny, which is, of course, available on 4 different platforms. And it's also coming off the recent Japanese launch a week earlier of Smash Brothers in the 3DS, which did flipping insane numbers. I think it clocked in 1 million in its first week, which I actually made a video on. I'll link that below. And then another 350,000 in its second week. So that game is doing gangbusters. So because of those two games as comparisons, people look at 38,000 when they were considering it to be 1 week and saying, well, that's really poor, abysmal sales. The game isn't going to do well. Operation Platinum is a failure and all this other kind of hyperbolic bullshit. And it's like, that's kind of not really the issue that people need to be paying attention to. So if that game was to be on pace at 38,000 copies in the first 2 days to sell well over 100,000 copies in its first actual week once the next week's sales come out, what I find interesting is that in Japan, where Destiny had released a week prior, going up against Smash Brothers, it released on both PlayStation platforms. So you have 2 PlayStation platforms, the PS3 and PS4, where that game, which I love, by the way, I love Destiny. You can check out my review. I freaking love the game, so I'm not dissing the game. But that game sold between the 2 platforms about almost 100, actually probably just over 140,000 copies. And that's on 2 different platforms in its first week. Now, if Bayonetta manages to sell anywhere between 100 and 150,000 copies, for a game that, to be fair, is nowhere near as high profile as Destiny and is also exclusive to only one system, seriously, that is pretty damned okay, and I feel like people don't need to be losing their shit over it and discussing whether or not this game is successful or isn't. And when I calm down for a second, what's also interesting too is how excited and how into this whole concept of what games sell well we all get as gamers and gamers in the community. Whether it's somebody who's a Nintendo fan or a Bayonetta fan wanting it to sell well, or wanting it to be perceived that it's selling well, I should say, or whether it's somebody who's against, anti-Bayonetta or anti-Nintendo or what have you, and doesn't want to see it do well, we just care. Everyone cares so much about these kinds of things. Destiny's got all sorts of buzz and controversy going on, and now here's one you can add to Bayonetta at this point, and it's just interesting that we all care. And it's like, do we even need to care? To tell you the truth, Like, I, for example, already know that I'm going to get Bayonetta and be playing it. I'm excited for the game. I know that I'm going to get to play it. So do the sales really have to matter? I mean, when you're thinking about the future of a game, I guess so. And if you want to see sequels and stuff down the road, sure. But when it comes to the game itself, you know, for anyone out there who's excited to play Bayonetta, for example, does it really have to matter if it sells well or not? Technically, it doesn't. Yes, we want it to sell well. I want it to sell very well. I want it to be very popular. I want it to do really well for the Wii U. I want it to be good enough to warrant. Games has already said they would love to make a Bayonetta 3 because they loved working with Nintendo and they think that they've made the best game yet because they worked with Nintendo. So there's, you know, way more reasons for me to want to see the game sell well than to not. But the point I'm trying to get at is it's just interesting how much we invest in what these numbers look like and especially how it's perceived, which is why you get a lot of people telling everyone else, hey, you're not paying attention. It's actually 2 days worth of sales, you dick. It's not a full week, you know? And, you know, again, I'm on that side. I agree. I want people to know this. But it's just interesting when, you know, breaking down the dichotomy of the people who want it to fail and people who want it to succeed and the fact that we just care about it so much. You know, but going back to the main topic, and I'll go ahead and wrap this up, pretty short video today, but the main topic is still, when looking at the numbers, I just think it's really weird that a lot of the larger sites reporting these sales are trying to give a negative spin of Bayonetta's doing poorly, Bayonetta's not doing well, it's a big flop, Operation Platinum is a big fuck-off piece of shit. And it's like, why are none of you bringing up the fact that instead of, to me, okay, if I was going to write this article, what I would say is Bayonetta does awesomely in 2 days, not Bayonetta flops in 1 week, because it didn't flop in 1 week. It actually did really, really well for 2 days worth of sales. By the time the next week's numbers come out, that will be an entire 7 days worth of sales as well as an entire 9 days worth of totals. So I feel like we're going to be looking at very different numbers. The game doesn't need to be selling millions and millions to be successful. I mean, obviously it needs to do pretty well, but it doesn't need to do as well as Destiny did because it didn't have a fucking $5 million budget like a lot of other games do, or like Destiny did. So, you know, I feel like if the game in Japan sells a couple 100,000 copies, that's going to be considered a pretty darn good success, especially in Japan, where, remember, it's a smaller territory. The huge profile games out there that do really well, they don't do the same kind of numbers as they do out here. Again, for example, Destiny on PS4 did 90,000 copies its first week in Japan, but it did over 1 million in the US. So it's really just a matter of the market and how different it is. I think Bayonetta is going to do much, much better in America. There's a much bigger push. People are more excited about it and wanting to work to make it successful. And there's a lot of Wii U owners out there, and more every day. And so I feel like it's going to do pretty darned okay. The game, when it comes to Operation Platinum, this is the last thought I'll leave you with, because I support Operation Platinum, obviously. I made a video about it. And I support it for the right reasons, not the reasons that are trying to piss other people off. I just like the idea of gamers getting together to support what looks like a quality game, you know. And it's a nice benefit that it happens to be on my personal next-gen system of choice. So that's really what that comes down to. And when you look at what Operation Platinum is trying to do, trying to help Bayonetta 2 reach 1 million copies sold in sales, retail sales, that's a great goal. I think it's more than achievable. And I feel like if that's worldwide, that can be okay, because I feel like it's going to do a couple 100,000 copies in Japan. And I feel like it's, you know, it could do anywhere between 500,000 or more than 1 million here in the States. And to tell you the truth, if it doesn't hit 1 million in the States, but hits, you know, 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 copies, and then in Japan and the UK does another couple 100,000 copies, I feel like, provided that the worldwide sales of Bayonetta 2 reach 1 million, that we can all feel okay and feel pretty good about it. I think the game has the potential on the low end to do 500,000 copies, but I think it'll do quite a bit more. I think there is an extremely good chance the game does sell over 1 million copies here in the States. There's a lot of people looking forward to it. I know a couple of people who've actually bought a Wii U to play Bayonetta 2. And I think that that's a great thing, that a game like that could sell them on a $300 next-gen system. That's awesome. But that's also how it's supposed to be. I bought my PS4 for goddamn Destiny, and that's not even a system exclusive. It's a multi-platform game, you know? So it's just interesting when you look at all the facts. So that's my feelings kind of on Operation Platinum and where we're looking at for the sales to go. I would love it to sell over 1 million in the States. I think there's a very good chance it will. But even if it doesn't, which also has a good chance of happening, I feel like we're going to hit 1 million worldwide. These sales actually encourage me. That's what's mind-boggling about how people are acting about this whole thing. To me, 38,000 copies in 2 days is awesome. That's greatly encouraging. I feel great about its future in Japan, which makes me feel even better about its success and its future in the States and in the UK. So, I don't know. People sometimes just like to get a stick up their ass, you know. I hate this, I hate that, I hate the Wii U, I hate Bayonetta, I hate the PlayStation Vita, I hate the Xbox One. I don't fucking know. Everyone hates everything, and I just don't know why. So, I want everything to do well. I want Bayonetta 2 to do well. I cannot wait to get my copy. I will be calling in sick for like 3 days straight. I might even try to organize it before the game comes out, by the time Bayonetta 2 comes out, because I just can't wait. So, I don't know. That's some of the controversy, quote unquote, if you want to call it, around the sales of Bayonetta 2. Yes, I am a Nintendo fan and a Bayonetta fan, so yes, I have a positive perspective on it, but I'm proud of that. So that's just the way it is. You know, that's what you're going to get from my news, and I think a lot of you probably know that if you're used to following the channel. So that's it. You know, definitely curious what you guys think. There's a lot of thoughts on both sides of the argument. Do you think Operation Platinum still has a chance at succeeding? Do you think that this is actually a blow to Bayonetta's success, or at least in Japan? You know, what does this information tell you? And that's it. Thanks as always for tuning into the video. Of course, if you like what I'm doing, please feel free to subscribe to Rule of Two Review, like and share the video, follow the links below to the Facebook page and the Twitter. And thanks for tuning in. I will catch you guys on the next video.